To today's Planning Commission meeting and call the meeting to order, please. Can you hear me? I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Commission meeting today and call the meeting to order. Sorry.
Volume. Raise the volume, please.
Okay, we'll try it one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. You still can't hear me?
Better, but
Okay. See if I can get this closer. How about now?
a little better.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. Would that be okay?
Thank you.
All right, I'll use the loud Irish voice then. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you all to the Planning Commission meeting today. As we always do, let's start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I ask Karen if we're in compliance with all the Freedom of Information Act requirements?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you to call the roll, please, Karen?
Certainly. Mr. D'Arienzo? Here. Mr. Hens?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
And Mr. Siebold is excused.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have a pleasant task to do, which is the swearing in of the new commissioners. And you're going to do that, Josh?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could ask our new members to please come down and join me here in front of the dais. All right. If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I am duly qualified according to the Constitution of this state to exercise the duties of the office to which I have been appointed, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties thereof, and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this state and of the United States. So help me God. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you.
Of course, let us all add our welcome to the new commissioners. You're going to be a welcome addition for us, and we're happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next move here would be to approve the agenda. Can I first ask, does staff have any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, if not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Here, Chuck, okay. Second, please? Second, Rick. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, it's unanimous, so the agenda is approved. We have no minutes for this meeting, for the last meeting, because this is a special meeting. So at the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission, we'll have the minutes at that time. Next, I would ask staff: is there any appearance that's planned by any members of the public?
Yes, sir. Our first citizen is Miss Kelly LeBlanc. Miss LeBlanc, could you step up to the podium and state your name for the record?
Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly LeBlanc. I'm the co-chair of the Jonesville Preservation Society and the author of the survey on overdevelopment, which received over 1,700 responses to date. A key question of the survey was, in 2014, Hilton Head zoning was changed to allow increased housing density, increased building height, decreased distance between houses, decreased distance from street to house, and decreased open space. With the exception of workforce housing planning or Gullah family compounds, do you want the town council to roll back zoning and limit overdevelopment? 96% of respondents said yes. One reason for the 2014 LMO changes was to help Gullah landowners who have oddly shaped parcels by decreasing the required setbacks, which is the distance from house to neighboring property line and the distance from street to house. According to Sean Collin, the assistant town manager, there are approximately 12 oddly shaped Gullah-owned parcels on Hilton Head that don't have sufficient setbacks. The town can help these individual landowners via variances rather than base zoning. The town has already implemented a fast-track program to help this type of owner. It's my understanding that a survey, title search, and lawyer fees would be involved. This would be a good use of funds available via the Gullah Historic Neighborhood Community Development Corporation Fund, which is new, which has, I believe, several million dollars, not hundreds of millions, but millions. A second reason given for the 2014 LMO changes was to spur the economy via development. The unintended consequence has been investor-driven overdevelopment, which has negatively impacted the availability of essential workforce housing, traffic, the environment, resident quality of life, and the loss of Gullah homesteads. According to the National Census, the 2022 estimated African American population on Hilton Head was only 6%. The actual number is likely lower than that because of the dramatic increase in housing costs since COVID. The Gullah Geechee Cultural Preservation Project report, which was dated April 2019, stated, the minimum objective should be to maintain the current Gullah land ownings in terms of acreage and even increase the amount of land owned as an ideal to strive towards. The ultimate goal of cultural preservation is to preserve the very existence of the Gullah people as residents of Hilton Head Island. The best way to achieve that goal is to provide them with economic sustainability, close quote. The primary source of economic sustainability should not be overdevelopment, which the majority of Hilton Head Islands oppose, the Hilton Head Island residents oppose. It should be, instead, education, which will be generationally economically sustainable. I urge the Community Development Corporation to create an essential workforce education fund, give residents, especially Gullah residents, grants to train in essential services such as nursing, teaching, carpentry, and plumbing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. LeBlanc. Is there other public comment, please?
Yes, Mr. Mark Simpson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I've been in front of the Town Planning Commission a long time. I've been here since '87. I'm here on behalf of Transcon and Industries, and it appears they're being targeted. And this amendment, excluding changing the definition of single family is prejudicial to them, and they want to object to it. I don't see the comprehensive impact study. Is that included somewhere in materials that was requested last week? Is that included somewhere? The comprehensive impact study that staff was asked to prove, excuse me, my back is killing me. Staff was asked to produce. Do we know?
Does anybody recall comprehensive impact study, or was the question asked during the meeting, what is the impact of this amendment?
Is that available?
Do the staff have what's being referred to here?
The staff will be presenting on this item later in the meeting.
Okay, so we'll get a chance to see what that is
Thank you.
and react to that, I hope. Because if it's just saying that new nonconformities will be created. That's not, I don't think, what you asked for. This will have a big impact on a lot of folks, and it seems to me it's a taking and unconstitutional at that. So I'd like to speak after I hear what their plan is. That makes sense.
Well, so you're allowed 3 minutes to speak at this point. The question of whether you speak again will have to be decided.
Okay. Well, this seems targeted in one neighborhood, and I think we can sort of lay out the steps that have been involved in that targeting. And, you know, if you comply with the terms of the LMO, the concept is, well, we'll just very quickly change the terms of the LMO. And that's not really the way we should be doing things, I don't think. But we'll see.
Okay, we certainly appreciate your comments.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Next, Karen?
Yes, sir. Mr. Skip Hoagland?
Skip Hoagland, Windmill Harbor. Why hasn't a master land plan ever been created in perpetuity so we have the tools necessary to save ourselves from overdevelopment, untenable traffic, and ongoing runoff pollution caused by encroachment of our creeks, rivers, and estuaries? Polluted oysters is the first bad sign. It took 1 million years to create. We destroyed this in 30 years. Why has one road and one bridge all the way to I-95 never been taken into consideration? Why did South Carolina DOT, what did they say about this one road and its maximum usage? With Bluffton and Hardyville out of control with overdevelopment, 200 here, 300 here, and no master land plan, has any thought been given as to what's going to happen 10 years from now, not to mention how long it's going to take to get off Hilton Head Island in a hurricane or the next trip to the airport? Has any thought been given about increased wrecks and traffic delays or emergency vehicles' time in reaching our hospitals? We're already experiencing that. Our future road repairs and delays and the negative impact of 3 million tourists versus 45,000 local residents that we now experience. Tourism is welcome, but not at the expense of locals. What does South Carolina DOT say about these same 3 million tourists entering Hilton Head on one road and one bridge? Don't you think it's time to stop kicking the can down the road? The bridge is nothing but a stent for your heart and will do little to nothing over the next 10 years. $300 million of taxpayers' money is a waste. I'm a 47-year resident. I moved here for Charles Fraser Vision for a low-key, high-end retirement and resort that nature and environment was taken into consideration. It's like the song goes by Joni Mitchell. They took all the trees, they put them in a tree museum, and they charged the people $1.50 to see them. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got until it's gone. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're just a long line of elected officials unable to control the developers, the town managers, and our crooked town lawyers in conflict with developer clients, and many tied to the chamber tourism interests and their illegal profits and the secret Greater Island Council members' special interest greed. Unfortunately, it's too late to repair all the damage done. It's only going to get worse with no master land plan in perpetuity. We are, for me, at 6 pounds in a 5-pound bag, and we're heading to 10 pounds. Like a slow-growing cancer. If you don't stop it or remove it, it will eventually kill you. Also, we need to defund the chamber's millions in A tax and missing millions of hospitality taxes unaccounted for, and add this to Senator Davis's 1% tax, and let the tourists pay to buy lands and improve our infrastructure. We need to stop giving this chamber millions of dollars. Technology provides tourism for free. It's a different world. So let's stop the insanity and get that $5 million. This is not Charleston, Myrtle Beach, nor do we want it this way. The good news is y'all are all affected like all of us. So I assume that you're worried about it like all of us, and you'll do something for your families, your friends, and your children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comment. Karen, is there another?
Yes, Ms. Rhonda Carper.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Carper. I am a full-time resident on Bradley Circle. and I'm here today to talk with the blessing of over 24 of our property owners, all of whom either make HHI their home or hope to in the future. When I bought my property back in 2009, there were less than 20 homes there, mostly full-timers, some part-timers, some long-term renters, and a few short-term rentals. It was a very small, quiet, mostly undeveloped community. And in 2014, when the council decided to do an island-wide LMO change to try to increase density, it devastated our community and many others on the island. I'm sure people know from South Forest, North Forest, even in Jonesville, the things they're trying to do. Now, after countless hours, hundreds of meetings, the town staff and council are heading in the right direction to correct some of these catastrophic decisions. For us, not having an outline of what a single-family home was took 2 home lots, 2-story homes on them with a total of a count of 7 bedrooms, and turned it into 5-story homes with 47 bedrooms and 56 bathrooms. All because we did not have a clear, concise definition of what a single-family home is. That developer, Radu Chindris, came here on the March 16th meeting and confused some of you by saying certain things. He owns multiple lots on BC, and the changes to the LMO would restrict him from building an additional 50,000 plus or minus square feet of homes in our small community. That is why his lawyer is here today. Not having these changes allow him and other developers on HHI to find those loopholes and build homes that will never be used as a single-family home or a long-term rental. We've lost all that in our community. No one can come there to live. This type of overdevelopment in our neighborhood has caused water, sewage, drainage, parking issues, as well as erosion on our roads. Also at that meeting, a member of our own community came here, Carl Braden, and spoke. Why? I'm not sure, because Mr. Braden has previously sold all of his properties to Mr. Chindris and owns nothing on Bradley Circle. He wants him to develop this to make the money. Mr. Braden also wrongly represented the views of our Bradley Circle community here and online, stating that we are not, and they were not based on the truth. We do not want more short-term rentals. We understand there will be some, but we need to control the overdevelopment. The developer, Mr. Chindris, with or without the help of Mr. Braden, is not planning on helping the Gullah Geechee community, as he stated, or providing workforce housing. They choose to carelessly toss around sensitive topics to manipulate the good intentions of people like you, along with the town staff. But actions speak louder than words. And Mr. Chindris and Mr. Braden speak of nothing but money and greed. It is time for a change, clear, concise guidelines in the LMO, and negate the loopholes and prevent the developers from obliterating communities. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Karen, any more public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are several citizens in the audience that would like to speak.
Okay. Let's go one at a time here. Just raise your hand, come to the podium, and sit. Okay. Say who you are and where you reside, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Josephine Wright. I live at 51, forgive me for I'm not very loud talker, 51 Jonesville Road, Hilton Head. I'm 93 years old. And when I moved here in 1994, my husband and I retired here. And we were 51 years married. He passed away in 1998. However, my problem is in reference to the harassment by the company that is doing the building on this Jonesville Road. Most people know Jonesville Road, at the time I came, was only a dirt road. 2 years later, it became a paved road. Hardly any traffic or anything coming. Today, we have an invasion of a construction going on right next to my property. Their property is around me, and I'm right here in the middle of it. And it seems that I am being harassed because they want my property. They have gone into they come on my property when they first started the construction, moving around until my granddaughter made the complaint, and then they stopped. And I'm only giving you this version because this is from the personal harassment that I feel. The construction people well, let me say they have joined into trying to buy my property, offering me minimal amounts of money. Sometimes property is not money. It's what you love and where you live. And if you want to live in peace and quiet, you're there to be resting. I hope that I have gone into certain, they have taken and pulled a lawsuit. They went into negotiation first with other people for my property without my appearance or my acceptance. That's number one. Number two, there are certain things that happened on my property that wasn't really, I would say, not very well for me. And I have lost my thought.
Okay.
But however, this company is trying to get my property without me. They have taken, I have gone into certain financial problems because I had to hire a lawyer. I now have to go try to find a surveyor for my property. And I wish that there is something that can be done to stop the harassment.
Thank you so much for your comments, ma'am. Is there anyone else in the audience that would wish to speak? Please identify yourself and your residency, please.
Hello, my name is Daniel Anthony. I'm co-chair of the Jonesville Preservation Society. For those who may have a misunderstanding as to what the JPS is all about, let me explain. JPS was formed for the sole purpose of creating a more transparent form of communication between town officials and the residents of Hilton Head, to help the town better understand the views, concerns, desires of their residents with regard to overdevelopment, short-term rentals, density, property setbacks, parking, zoning, district plans, etc. And in return, help the residents to understand the rules and regulations that dictate how property can be developed and utilized. This is the absolute sole reason that the JPS exists. The JPS is not against development, short-term rentals, or the ability of a property owner to develop their land. All these things can be done, as long as they're done correctly and in appropriate areas. Development, when done correctly, can be a good thing. However, development done incorrectly will have a negative and irreversible impact to this island for generations to come. We have all already seen this. Bailey's Cove, just to mention one. Developers pillage this island for profit. Developers don't care about this island. They never have, and they never will. Make no mistake, they're here for one reason only, and that's to make money. This island has catered to their bank accounts long enough. Nearly everyone agrees, town officials and residents alike, that the current LMO is outdated, doesn't work anymore. In January, as my co-chair has mentioned, we, the JPS, presented the response to our survey on overdevelopment. I want to read this part again. Out of over 1,700 respondents, 96% wanted the town to roll back zoning to curb overdevelopment. The three top concerns were traffic volume, quality of life, and environmental impacts. The town staff, under the direction of town council, is working on rewriting the LMO, and they have worked tirelessly, and I applaud them for their efforts. Today's amendments are another step in that process. The JPS, the residents here today, and the residents watching from home totally support the town staff, and I ask this commission to support the town staff also. I encourage you, this commission, to forward these amendments for the betterment of Hilton Head, and might I remind you that we, the residents of Hilton Head, we are Hilton Head.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. We appreciate it. Anyone else, please? Yes, ma'am.
Mary Pratt. I live on Jacana. I didn't write anything down, so I'm going to wing it. But all the houses on our street this year, we have 4 new spec homes, which is 90 more heads in the beds. That's in addition to what we already have on the street. And if you count how many more garbage trucks, how many more rental people will be checking the houses, cleaning the houses, landscapers, it's just unbelievable. That's just on the land side, not the ocean side. This is just the land side. We've been in that house since 1979 with original owners when it was a dirt road. These homes are not, they're not residences, they're commercial properties. They should be, rezone them to commercial properties because they're not any, the people that yell at us when we try to just say, please stop screaming in the pool, it just doesn't work. No matter how nice we are to them, it's crazy. So I don't need 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Others, please? Any other comments from the floor? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Carl Braden, and I do live in Chaplin for 25 years, and I didn't want to have to defend myself today from all these attacks, but I did have a different view than the Preservation Society, and I've faced their wrath, and I understand they have their mission, which if you read their comments, it's usually stop development, stop. But that being said, my point of view is I did live on Bradley Circle. I did sell my lots. I still enjoy the circle very much. It still, to this day, is 87.5%, 6% residents, not 4%. The 4% are, half of them are very loud, but it is a vacation area, historically, traditionally, and so on. So that being said, if I could just read my prepared notes, please. I live on a dirt road with a Gullah family, the Christophers, and it is an RD tract. That's why I'm here, defending my rights, not trying to take anybody else's or hurt anybody else, or going against everything they're looking for, which is to keep things nice. I'm all for it. I help to keep things nice, and I don't appreciate being attacked, but nonetheless, okay, so. Some say it makes no sense, but there are valid reasons for definition of single family, including 2 units on a single lot. And that's why we're here today. This allows for a duplex with 1 owner or a separate family apartment, accessory dwelling unit, mother-in-law suite, lockout unit, if the density allows for it. And as a zoning right in areas such as resort development, an absolute right to have a lockout unit, which is also an accessory use unit, without having to deal with multifamily regulations, access easement regulations, increased buffer width, all of this, unless, whether it's for your children or your family, an attic apartment, and so on, it's going to make it more difficult. So I was just reading what they just released today to try to explain that there's no change in buffers, but in fact, if you look a little closer, I believe that you will have to get a variance, and if you get a variance with multifamily, you can only get 10% reduction, so it's 18 feet. So you're losing 13 feet, no matter what. So people are losing their land, they're losing density, and most of the lots in Off Plantation are Native Islanders or minorities, and they don't want to think about that, but that's the truth. And that's why I think that you need, especially with the new members coming in, take your time, explore these issues. There's also affordable housing units that we need to think about, and lockouts provide affordable housing. And families need to keep their children in their homes often, like me, and it helps. So please take a look at these things and don't cave like the last time when they submitted a proposal that included an LMO amendment that had to be sent back. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Karen, anyone else? Oh, yes, sir.
My name is Newton Green, and I'm very closely associated with the Jonesville Preservation Society, and I applaud all the work they have done to this point. I have a direct question for everyone sitting at the council here today. You all have very interesting backgrounds, and I'm sure you've read all of the documents we've been talking about today. You all are familiar with the definition of multifamily, single-family, lockouts, mother-in-law suites. You all know that. My open question to you is, who's enforcing this? It's happening on a regular basis. It's written. It was part of the 2014 LMO. Who is enforcing this? All of the people that have spoken so far have talked about this in various iterations and forms. So we can't say it's not happening. Under whose watch should this be more closely looked at and rectified? So I'm challenging you to come back to the community and answer my question: who is enforcing the 2014 LMO? Because certainly it's not being done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Jack Daly, Forest Beach, and I'm very glad to see this happening today. We've been fighting with lockouts, I don't know, 15 years, maybe 20 years in Forest Beach. The last thing you want is a lockout. That is the last piece of development you ever want to see, because it's set up where one group of people do not have access to the electrical panel as they're required to by National Electric Code. So there's supposed to be somebody on site 24/7 with a key that can access that panel in case something goes wrong. Those developments fail at a rate that's multiple of regular developments. So what you have then is one regular standard conforming unit and a unit that's inferior and unsafe. That happened at Zandu, it happened at Ocean Walk. And if you do it in a place that's less resort rental friendly, like Jonesville, they're gonna fail at an even higher rate. And we've had problems with people living in a lockout unit, plugging in space heaters and other overcurrent devices, throwing breakers in the other unit. They didn't know what they were doing, how many amps the circuit was. It's a big electrical problem. So National Electric Code says each occupant must have ready access to the panel for all overcurrent devices, right? So please do not have any more lockouts. It's been a nightmare for us, and it's new to Jonesville, but it's been our nightmare for 15, 20 years. I applaud making sense of the language of how many units and clearing up the language on single-family development, single-family housing units on single-family lots. You know, some of the definitions are really mysterious and exploitable. And if it's exploitable for $1, if the code is not clear and the language is not perfectly clear and simply plain, it'll get exploited. You know, a developer will hire an attorney and they'll push it and push it to the limit. So I'm glad to see this is happening. I wish this would have happened 15 years ago for us. Maybe it's a little late for some parts of Forest Beach, but it's not too late for these guys. So please consider what they're saying and please, no more lockouts, and just make the language clear and simple. And, I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like the one single-family lot with a single-family house and a single family that actually lives there. That's very simple, and but that's what it should be. And if we say anything different, it's going to get exploited for $1. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Fee, and I'm also from Forest Beach. I've been a long-term, full-time resident for the last 10 years. When my husband and I bought our home in 2008 down on Pelican Street, all the way down, we were letter P, so we weren't in the mix of Coligny and all of the commercial activity, shall we say. Most of the residents at that time were all full-timers. There was maybe one short-term rental on the land side of Forest Beach. We now have over half of our homes as short-term rentals. Every Saturday, there's the turnover, there's landscapers, there's pool, there's parking, there's traffic. It's very difficult to get home or to try to go shopping on many days. I've seen apartments go on the second floor of a garage. I've seen garages being created on the corner of Jacana and North Forest Beach. I would go visit North and stay with my family for a couple of weeks, and I'd come home, and there'd be a building, a giant building, close to the edge. We really do need to look at the LMO. We need to look at tree preservation and maintain the quality of life for the residents here on the island. Thank you.
Other comments? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is George Paletta. I live at 110 Club Course Drive, Sea Pines Plantation. I just want to bring to the fact that since 2014, of the LMO's changes, this island has been exploited by developers and builders. It is time that we correct those inequities that have brought us to this phase of the situations that are facing you and the new people here on the board. Any application for development should be shown to the public when they come in, not when they're already done, so that people could voice their opinions and bring to you what the real causes they feel may affect that property or their property. The second point is we all make investments. Look at the stock market today. I bet you all of you looking at your 401ks have seen it go down or go where you don't want it to go. So when people come up here and say, well, I was given a piece of property and I really should be able to build 2 or 3 houses on it and I would make a windfall, well, that's not what Hilton Head is about. We're not here for you to make money like the developers make and then run. We're here to live. I've been here since 1980 and I've seen what's happened to this island. And the next guy I'm going to get to is your traffic guy. But the LMOs must correct this new planning board must correct the LMOs of 2014. They've been exploited, and they have to stop. They have got to stop. The town board in itself has failed us residents dramatically. Not your fault, but in coercion of the LMOs, they have allowed certain things to take place on this island for the benefit of developers and builders. So we now have a situation where it's come to the forefront. Someone has to step up, as George Patton did in World War II, and say, I smell the blood on the war front, and I'm ashamed to say I love it, but at least he's getting something done. So I hope somewhere here and somewhere in that back room, there's a George Patton for our Hilton Head Island, that we moved here and are living here 40 years. I didn't expect to come here earlier. We used it as a vacation home and never rented. So please don't shed alligator tears for people who say, well, I bought it and now I wanted to rent it so that I can save for later in life. Well, that's fine, but you do that according to the rules. And those lockouts are a disaster. And I'm surprised the fire department ever allowed the town to approve those. I'm surprised. But God bless you guys. You got a big job to do. Please do it in deference to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Others? Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Judge. I live on the island off Skyview Manor, and I'm building on Jonesville Road right now. I didn't plan on talking today, but I just wanted to come say a few words because unlike a lot of the people that spoke today, I'm a new person to Hilton Head. We vacationed here for years and fell in love with the island, the beauty of it, the friendliness of it. And that was starting around 2000. And we bought a part-time home here. We didn't rent it because we didn't want that. We didn't want that for our neighborhood. And then when our kids finally went off to college, we decided to come down here for permanent. And so we're building our last house on Jonesville Road. And just want to say thank you to everybody who came and everybody who spoke because it's a wonderful community, a special place. We love it here. And we do know and recognize that things started changing when the LMO changed in 2014. And there's a lot of development that's frankly out of hand and very surprising to us when it started happening, especially on Jonesville, because that's our area. We didn't expect this. We had no idea. We felt almost blindsided when it all came to fruition, and then they went in and leveled the place. It was like being back in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we came from. That's what they do in Raleigh. They just level everything and start over. And we didn't think they would do that here. And it shocked us. And we know that you guys have a big job to do. We appreciate you stepping forth and volunteering to do it. And we want to support you, and we want you to support us. And together we can come together and we can make it right. We can roll it back, and we can make it the Hilton Head that, for me personally, we fell in love with and just wanted to come and spend the rest of our days here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Other comments? We're getting to the point where the number of people that have spoken is about equal to the people in the audience. So that's a good sign of progress, but we do want to make sure that everyone has a chance to remark if you'd like. Okay, seeing no other interest in comment, can I ask, was there any portal comment that we need to?
Yes, sir, there were, and a full set of the comments were sent to the Planning Commission and will be made part of the official record.
Okay, thank you. Does everybody on the Planning Commission have those remarks and have had a chance to review them? Good. Okay, then what we'll do is move on to the what's called the unfinished business part of our agenda. That is the LMO amendments. The Town of Hilton Head is proposing to amend Chapters 4 and 10 of the Land Management Ordinance, LMO, to revise the following sections. Section 16-4-103.2.2 and Section 16-4-103.E.2 and 16-10-105 to eliminate the allowance of divisible dwelling units, and Section 16-10-103.A.2 to modify multifamily and single-family definitions. And we'll have a presentation by Missy Luck, which will both go into what we're talking about here and answer some of the questions that the commission had at the last meeting.
Okay. Missy Lewick, Assistant Community Development Director for the record. Welcome new planning commissioners. Happy to have you. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to step backwards a little bit and talk a little bit more about our broader LMO amendments plan that we're working to implement. And this slide shows the implementation path that we're on right now. We happen to be implementing phase 3 of a five-phase LMO amendment plan. We worked in mid-January of this year after we hired a consultant team to conduct a critical analysis of our land management ordinance by a code consultant team. And we met to review that analysis. It was called a SWOT analysis of the code. So we identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then analyzed a plan to implement some strategies to improve our code. And so that's what this 5-phased approach is. And then I'll kind of walk you through those phases, 2 of which are already adopted by town council. So phase 1, again, was reviewed by the Planning Commission and was adopted by council earlier this month. This was the set that removed the waiver process, allowed additional sections to seek a variance from, allowed outdoor screened bicycle storage, clarification in manufacturing use as it relates to the size of a microbrewery, replaced the month of which we assess traffic impact analysis counts, changed when or how plantings are required on single-family lots as part of a subdivision and the certificate of compliance process. We changed the definition of changeable copy so that we can allow signs to be changed electronically. We also amended the calculation for height and added owner's consent as a requirement for minor subdivisions, and then also required a public hearing requirement for subdivision amendments. Phase 2 was also recently adopted by council and was reviewed by the Planning Commission, actually came back to the Planning Commission for a second time, and that was to identify the standards for those subdivision amendments or deviations from previously platted subdivisions. Again, those first 2 sets are approved and adopted, are currently enacted. So what we're talking about today is phase 3. And phase 3 is 2 definition changes, so the definition of single family and multifamily. So we're recommending that those definitions be modified, as well as the elimination of divisible dwelling units. Phase 4 is a more substantive amendment set, and this will include a lot more of the details and process improvements from that SWOT analysis. So it'll include a range of changes, including administrative and procedural changes. We'll look at creation of sustainable development incentives, a lot of updates to our residential and commercial site design standards, including context-sensitive design, neighborhood scale, pedestrian connectivity. We're looking at massing of buildings, parking, and we're going to create some additional graphics and illustrations in the code to help better illustrate the text language. We're looking at modifying the traffic impact analysis methodology, signage code changes, stormwater, as well as strengthening our environmental section, including wetland, beach, dune, and tree regulations. So that's coming in phase 4. And again, on that timetable, phase 4 is programmed right now to be coming to the Planning Commission in May and June. So that's phase 4. And then phase 5 is a comprehensive review of the entire code. So we're going to look at every chapter, every section within the code. We're also going to overhaul the code and its organizational structure. So while it might not be a completely full rewrite, but it will include a much more user-friendly output of the code. And then the big piece is that it will be brought more into alignment with our plan and integration with all of the outputs from this summer's Growth Framework and District Planning Initiative. So we have a consultant team that we're working with on the amendments project, as well as a consultant team that's working on the larger Growth Framework and District Plan Initiative. And we have coordination calls built into both of those consultant teams to make sure that we're coordinating as both of those processes unfold, such that the LMO amendments that would be part of Phase 5 could be implemented in short order after we make the decisions on Growth Framework and District Planning. So I'm just going to stop right there because that's the broad discussion that we hadn't had with the Planning Commission on what we're doing with LMO amendments, and that it's a pretty comprehensive overview of a lot of change coming to the code. So does the Planning Commission have any questions before we dive into the amendment before you today?
Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Yes. The time frame for Phase 5?
Yeah. So Phase 5, again, so the block that we're identifying, and that's our best guess of how long the Growth Framework and District Planning process will take. But the plan is that those changes are happening in 2024 then. You can see we're anticipating maybe in the end of Q1 of 2024 and into the second quarter of 2024 would be when that would take place. So we're just anticipating that would be a significant piece of the implementation arm of those district and growth framework plans.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Missy, that was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Other questions, or we'll get to comments in just a moment. I will mention, just for the benefit of the three over here, that this was one of the key questions last time, which was we weren't sure that we knew the whole context of what we're talking about. What's Phase 1, what's Phase 2, what's included in Phase 3. And we're very thankful for you to come back and give us that context. And I think we'll do better next time, because there'll be some some confusing stuff that comes forward in these next phases. So we appreciate it.
Sure.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the questions, I watched last meeting, and one of the questions that I saw or heard one of the council members ask was the setbacks itself. Currently, I think it's 20, and they were thinking about moving it to 30 if it was a single family with a multifamily. So does that mean 15 and 15 on each property owner's home, or is it?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So that we're going to talk about the implications of the change from single family to multifamily and how it impacts setbacks and buffers.
Which, again, for the new folks, that was one of the questions. Let's see. So thank you, Ms.
Okay. So again, before you today is the text amendment before you, and it's our recommendation that you review it and that you forward a recommendation today to Town Council after we go through this presentation. So what's the purpose of this Phase 3 amendment set? It's to simply modify the definitions again for multifamily and single family to be more like commonly used language in land management codes or zoning codes, and also to eliminate divisible dwelling units to calibrate the applicable density such that there are no partial dwelling units. So what are the proposed changes that were included in the amendment? Again, the change for the definitions is to have the definition for single family pertain to, instead of currently it's one or two units is considered to be single family, and multifamily is currently 3 or more. And so it's to change the definitions of single family to apply to 1 single-family dwelling unit, and multifamily means 2 or more dwelling units. And then it's the elimination of divisible dwelling units. Divisible dwelling units we'll go through in the presentation after we analyze the single-family and multifamily a bit. So these considerations pertain to the change from single-family designation to multifamily. And I wanted to identify or make sure that it's clear that this doesn't change density. This is just changing whether or not the development on the parcel is, that we review from the development standards standpoint and how we apply setbacks and buffers, whether or not it's a single-family use on that parcel or multifamily. So again, if the parcel has enough density to have 2 units on it, this change doesn't change the density. They could still have 2 units. It's just that the setbacks and buffers for single family would no longer apply, and we would use the setbacks and buffers for multifamily. So we did some analysis in our GIS, and we found that there are approximately 146 properties on the island that have 2 homes on 1 parcel, okay? And so the majority of those are located in historic neighborhoods. However, of those properties, there are approximately only 50 of them that have density for 2 units and would be impacted by the change, such that a lot of the other parcels are larger than that and would have density for 3 or more, and the multifamily setbacks and buffers would already be applicable if that was the density that was applied on the parcel. So there are 3 zoning districts, the RS3, RS5, and RS6, that only allow for single-family use and not multifamily. So all of the other districts that also allow multifamily, so it's no change. So of those 3 districts that would not allow multifamily on them, there are no structures in those districts that would become non-conforming. So family compounds and subdivisions are also not affected by the change. It's codified in those applications that they're considered to be single-family use. So I will go through that there would be changes to setbacks and buffers and their applicability. The majority of the changes do result in flexibility, more flexibility to the sites, but there would be impacts if those properties were located on either tidal or freshwater wetlands. And we approximated that there's about 10 properties that are impacted by this change. So this is the graphic that shows those 146 parcels that could be impacted. And here's the document that identifies the setback and buffer impacts, if any. So we have different setback and buffer applications based on, the first item is based on your adjacent street setback, and depending on if you're on a major arterial, minor arterial, or other street, there's no change to the setback that would be applicable. For the adjacent use setback, in all cases for developed properties or undeveloped properties, it's the same or reduced. And in a lot of cases, if you were to look at our setback and buffer tables in the code, the setbacks predominantly are 20 if you're adjacent to single family or other residential, and the buffer is a type A, okay? And so some of the changes that really start to occur is that in the wetland buffers, currently, if you're adjacent to a tidal wetland, the current setback for residential is 20 feet, and there's no wetland buffer setback for freshwater. Now this changed from, and again, I just want to reiterate that this only applies if you had 2 homes on 1 parcel, and you were considered single family, and now you're considered multifamily, okay? Because 3 or more parcels on a lot would already have to meet all of these changes to the wetland buffer tables, okay? So for freshwater, there also is this introduction of meeting a minimum buffer requirement, but also an average. And I have some graphics. Again, we identified that this applies or could apply to 10 properties. So this is how we would apply setbacks and buffers on a tidal wetland property. Again, so this graphic shows that you have 2 homes on a parcel. It is considered to be single-family use currently under the code, and these would be the setbacks and buffers that would apply. There's a 20-foot adjacent use setback on the sides. There's a 40-foot adjacent street setback. The green line are the buffers that are applicable. And then there's, right now, a 20-foot tidal wetland buffer and a 5-foot wetland buffer setback from that. So if this went through, what would happen is that these particular homes would become legal non-conforming structures. You can see the multifamily buffer setback illustrated on the screen before you. There's still a 20-foot minimum tidal wetland buffer that's required, but you also have to meet a 40-foot average for all of your structures. And that's identified, or it's calculated by, it's a little bit of a math problem, but you have to take 10-foot increments along the tidal wetland buffer area and come up with the average for the site. And in this case, it would become non-conforming. And we'll go through toward the end of the presentation what it means to become non-conforming and how that would work. In other cases, if there was only one home on this property instead of two, and the wetland buffer standards were applied, it would meet both the average tidal wetland buffer and the minimum wetland buffer and would not be a non-conforming structure. So it all depends on where the homes are currently situated on the lot, whether or not they would become non-conforming structures or not with this change. I'll stop there before we get into divisible dwelling units. I know that the applicability of the wetland buffers and the average buffer setback is a little bit confusing to go over, so I wanted to stop there just to make sure that you understand that, as well as that the adjacent street setback and buffers and adjacent use setback and buffers in most cases have no change, or that their setbacks and buffers are actually reduced.
Do any commissioners have any questions on this part?
I guess the only question I have is, of the 10 lots that you're talking about, how many of those are built on already? Do you know that? I mean, versus being just empty land, that this could affect their future building? Because if it's built already, it would become non-conforming.
Sure. Shay, did you look at whether they were developed or undeveloped? They were all developed, yes.
They're all developed, so
Yes.
they would all become non-conforming. Okay.
They may or may not.
I mean,
Yeah, we could look at those individually, yes.
Are they concentrated like in a certain area or spread out pretty much through the island?
They're spread out. So they were, I mean, there are 10 of those that happen to be on fresh water or tidal that are the red dots on this map.
When we move the wetland buffers to the 20 and the 40, are those pretty standard in coastal communities? I mean, is the science going to allow us to maintain sustainability of the wetlands as a result of this, improve that kind of sustainability?
Well, this change, if they wanted to make some improvements to their site, they would have to go through the substitution of nonconformities process, which I'll go through later. As long as they were not making their encroachment in that setback or buffer any worse, and they were improving the site and bringing it more into conformance, then they could add improvements or redevelop their property.
I guess my question's a little bit different. When we look at the change in the actual setback itself, is that a setback that's consistent with how other coastal communities address tidal wetlands? Being a barrier island or being much more conservative, which is
Sure.
fine, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, it's really no change to the existing, I mean, this multifamily wetland buffer is on the books right now. Okay?
Change to the.
We're just applying it to 2 homes on a
Got it.
parcel instead of 3.
Okay.
Okay, so it's currently in place.
Okay.
Were any of those 10 lots in historical communities?
It's all likely, yes, they probably were. I don't have the numbers on how many of them there are. There were, of the 146 total properties that could be impacted, over 90% were in the historic neighborhoods.
Okay. All right.
Other questions? Okay, proceed.
Could those 10 properties we're talking about, could those be grandfathered in?
They are, yes.
Yes.
So that's what non-conforming means, so that the structures can remain, and they do become legal, non-conforming structures. And we have Chapter 16.7 is how we handle non-conformities. There are, they could, we'll just say if one of the homes, we'll just say maybe that one of the homes is a manufactured home and they want to remove it and replace it with another, they could still do that within the same footprint, meeting the requirements of the substitution for nonconformity section. Again, they couldn't make the nonconformity any greater, and they would have to do something on the site to bring the site as a whole more into conformance with the code. And they would have to make that replacement home within 18 months.
Any other questions before she moves on? Okay.
Can you explain what else they would have to do to that site?
Pardon?
Can you explain give me an example of what they might have to do to the site?
They might have to make it more into conformance, probably plant some wetland buffer vegetation, maybe reduce some, change to some impervious cover from pervious or something like that, or, I'm sorry. Okay, so the other half of this amendment set is the removal of divisible dwelling units. So all existing divisible dwelling units would become legal nonconformities. Again, divisible dwelling units are currently allowed as an accessory use with conditions, and they're only allowed in 2 districts, the Caligny Resort District and the Resort Development District. They're only allowed in multifamily or interval occupancy developments, and interval occupancy is commonly referred to as timeshare. We had a difficult time estimating the number of divisible dwelling units because we do not have that data tracked in our system. However, we do know that there are approximately 3,000 timeshares. A small portion of those, probably a few hundred at most, do include divisible dwelling units. We did find that some approved lockouts or divisible dwelling units have converted back to a whole unit. So again, and this graphic kind of shows what a lockout means. The conditions that are associated with divisible dwelling units require that it have a separate door and some other things. And then as far as those 3,000 that were reviewed and approved, they were reviewed and approved only in timeshare developments again. So we're not talking about accessory dwelling units or mother-in-law suites in single-family homes. That is not what this is. This is divisible dwelling units per the definition in the code, which again was a dwelling unit in a multifamily residential or interval occupancy development that includes 1 or more lockout bedrooms that can be physically closed or locked off from the remainder of the dwelling. Such units must have a bathroom. The size is limited to 75% of the gross floor area of the entire dwelling. So that is by definition, what a divisible dwelling unit is, and we're proposing that that use and the definition are struck from the code. So these changes will create nonconformities. It's normal for...
I have a quick question. So what is the status of any project that has not broken ground, that has proposed a divisible dwelling unit at this point?
Sure. I believe Mr. Coltrane can answer that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ferraro was asking a question. When you asked yours, what was the question?
That's okay. So we know what happens to existing properties that have been developed? Yeah, we're talking about divisible, I'm sorry.
It needs to be on, yeah.
We're talking about properties that already have been approved. But what about properties that are either in development or in the process of development or in the process of permitting? How does this affect them?
If the property has already been permitted and yet it just isn't built yet, if it's been permitted, this doesn't affect that. If a property has filed for a permit at a point in time prior to council's declaration that it intends to pursue these amendments, and prior to the time that its public hearing has been advertised for, then these amendments would not affect that. Once council has stated its intention to pursue these amendments and the public hearing has been advertised, then the ordinance can be applied to anything that comes in after that.
And what would happen if the project was approved and permitted, development stopped for some period of time? Is there a corridor at which, or a time period at which they lose that right?
Once it is approved, the State Vested Rights Act comes into play, and under the State Vested Rights Act, the vesting of permitted properties can go on literally for years.
For years, there's no statutory, like 3 or 5 years where the town can step in and either extend it or not?
Not in contravention to what the state statute provides. And I don't have that in front of me, but it's a number of extensions are provided for in the state statute, so.
I have it here if you want to look at it. Okay. The Vesting Act.
Is that the state one?
Yeah, this is 6/29/1510, Article 11.
And again, my name is Curtis Coltrane, and again, so under 6/29/1530, there's an initial 2-year period. Then the property owner may apply for an extension for at least 5 annual extensions. And then the local governing body can, on its own, provide for further extensions. But so there is a period of years once it is permitted that allows the permit to frankly be not acted on at all. But once it starts, then once it's permitted, then the state act takes over and tells you the limit of time that that permit remains valid.
Okay.
So if one's been permitted, some X number of months ago, that takes over, and that's governs how long the owner of that permit would have to execute it.
Okay, and if they do not approach the town at the point at which it expires, then they would have to get re-permitted? Is that what happened under the current LMO?
Well, under the LMO and, excuse me, under the LMO and this, if the owner of the permit allows it to expire, doesn't take the steps and the
Correct,
time
yeah.
periods pass and everything else, then you start over.
Okay, that answers my question, thank you. Okay, so just wanted to reiterate that there will be, from the change from single-family to multifamily, some properties will then become legally non-conforming structures, and then the removal of divisible dwelling units, so then all existing divisible dwelling units would become legal non-conforming uses, okay? For the divisible dwelling unit, if they were to convert that to a whole unit, they would not be able to put it back then if this was in place. So then those would, if they made the modifications to remove that half unit, then they would not be able to put it back. So here's the section here that I wanted to highlight as it pertains to nonconformities. So illegal nonconforming use, which has been discontinued for a period of 18 consecutive months, shall not be reestablished. Again, a structure that was formerly a legally nonconforming use, which has been discontinued, shall not again be devoted to any use. And then also, the substitution of nonconformities for development section is what would apply for redevelopment of a nonconforming structure. And again, these are the criteria that have to be met, 1 through 6. And this is where you would have to go through an application process called substitution of nonconformities for development, and the applicant would have to identify how they meet the 6 criteria. The 6 criteria include that it would not include any new development that increases the amount of encroachment into any required setback or buffer, so they can't make the nonconformity any greater.
that it would not increase the impervious cover on the site over the maximum allowed for the district or the existing impervious cover, whichever is greater. It would not result in a density in excess of what's allowed under the ordinance or the existing density, whichever is greater. It will not lessen the extent of nonconforming site features to the greatest extent possible, will not have an adverse impact on public health, safety, and welfare, and will lessen the extent of nonconformities related to any nonconforming structure to the greatest extent possible. So that is how any redevelopment or modifications to a site that has a nonconforming structure, that's the process that we would use. It's an administrative process. And we do have a number of nonconformities, legal nonconformities all over the island. Yes.
Another question. Just leaving the word redevelopment in there sounds like a little bit of a loophole to me. At what point does a property get considered defined as a redevelopment?
Are you talking about, well, the substitution of nonconformities for redevelopment is current code. It's not proposed code language. So
my question is, if someone a subsequent owner purchases a piece of land, they want to redevelop it, and they have to meet these 6 criteria. Has the word redevelopment been defined so we know, what condition the property has to be in a bare minimum to meet a definition of redevelopment? In other words, if they leave a piece of a corner of a foundation, does that say, I'm not really redeveloping? Is it based on square footage? Is it based on value of the development? How does that get defined?
I'm not sure that redevelopment is defined in our LMO, but typically, and with this case, you wouldn't have to leave a corner of the former structure. I mean, you could remove the home in its entirety, and you could put it back in the same footprint as long as you meet all of these criteria. I mean, we would hope that you would maybe move it more landward if it was a nonconforming wetland buffer to bring the site more into conformance. That certainly would be meeting criteria number 6 to lessen the extent of the nonconformities. So it could be that they're redeveloping their site by adding, some accessory, like a patio or a deck, or they just would need to go through this process. They can add additional development or redevelopment to the site, just have to meet these requirements.
So for example, the example you just gave, if they have existing structures and they want to put a patio on, you would consider that redevelopment of the property?
Correct.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what the amendments say, and that we've addressed all the questions that were raised by the Planning Commission. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from any of the commissioners? We'll go through a discussion period here right after we've got our questions answered, if there are any.
Yes.
Yeah. With the new setbacks, will it reduce the properties? That's going to reduce the property size. Do you think that will diminish the value of the properties in the historical neighborhoods?
Are you talking about those sites that have the increased setback and buffers? Because in the majority of the cases, the setbacks and buffers remain the same or are reduced. So the side setbacks or the adjacent use setbacks are either the same or reduced. And I guess to explain that further, so we have use-based setbacks and buffers. So what's next door to you impacts what setbacks and buffers apply to your property. So right now, again, and this change is only for 2 homes on one parcel going from what's considered single-family to multifamily, okay? In the adjacent street setbacks and buffers, there's no change. In the adjacent use, if you're adjacent to single-family or other residential, there's no change. If you're adjacent to commercial, then your setback is reduced and your buffer is the same. If you're adjacent to industrial, your setback is reduced and your buffer is reduced. The changes where your setback or buffer could be increased is only if you're adjacent to a tidal or freshwater wetland. And the number of properties that we're estimating that could be impacted is 10, is what we're estimating.
Okay.
And that's could. We haven't done a site analysis to determine if they all are or would become non-conforming structures.
So if my property is next to commercial, it'll be reduced.
Yes.
So that will kind of diminish the value of it.
That your setback would be reduced?
Yeah, my setback would be reduced?
So how would that reduce, I don't understand how that would reduce the value.
Oh, the setback would be reduced if it's next to commercial, right?
Yes.
Okay, no, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, then what we would do now is, we put the motion up first, or do we have the discussion first and then the motion?
You can do it either way.
Motion is first.
Okay. Put the motion up first.
Curtis spoke for you.
Oh, was that Curtis? Yes, sir. Put it up.
Was that a question?
There it is. Okay. Okay, so we see the recommendation up there. We're not asking for a motion at this point, but it'll give you a basis for discussion as we go forward. And I want to give each commissioner a chance to both discuss what they've heard today and ask any further questions that we have. And we'll start with Mr. Durenzio.
I think we've heard some very good discussion today, and it's become very clear as I've heard a lot of the discussion that things were a lot cleaner and smoother prior to the 2014 amendment, LMO amendment, that seemed to have increased the density in our community. I would venture to say, I'm confident to say that most all of us would like to see no increase in development or density in on our island. So with that in mind, I certainly like the way this recommendation reads.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Hens?
Yeah, thank you very much, Missy, for that was very comprehensive, and thank all of you for your public comments, very important and beneficial for us. I view this as
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I wasn't clear. You do need to have a motion on the table.
Oh, I need to have it before I
Yes.
have the discussion.
Yes.
I'm new at this. Thanks, Curtis.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion, shall I read the motion for the commission? Staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the proposed LMO amendments, parentheses, definition of single-family, comma, multifamily, semicolon, elimination of divisible dwelling units, and forward that recommendation to town council.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Now we'll proceed to discussion. Given that, is there anything more, Rick? You're still good?
No, sir.
Okay.
I think it's a matter of transparency. If single-family dwelling doesn't mean single-family dwelling, you don't have transparency, and anything can happen to that. And I don't know how you would plan as a town if single-family dwellings could be more than that. How would you plan for the traffic? How would you plan for, how would you plan? So to me, it's a transparency issue. It's the right thing. It's obvious that, and it puts us in a line with other planning commissions throughout the state. It's a priority for the town to preserve and protect the historic neighborhoods. It's one of our prime priorities. The family compounds and subdivisions are not affected by this proposed change, so I'm happy with it.
Okay. Mr. Campbell.
Oh, Tom took the words right out of my mouth here. I'd like to say that Missy and the staff, y'all did an excellent job on this presentation here. I mean, we're a lot more clear what's definitely going on, but I'm definitely a little bit more I could think about than I'm.
Mr. Miller.
To reiterate what you said, thank you, Missy and her staff, for the explanation. It's fairly black and white on the recommendations. I think it's fairly impactful of our community. I've been here 10 years. I love our community. I've seen the changes over the years, and I think it's amazing that 50, if not more than 50% of the attendees actually spoke. So I appreciate that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lobo?
Yeah, I agree with what's being said. I'll add that, especially being a new person on the commission, that there are things that are put into place in the past that hopefully you hope they were put in place with good faith to resolve issues, and maybe there were conversations like these, and they seem to make sense, but there were some unintended consequences that have clearly happened from some of those plans. So I think it's on us to correct those now that they've played out and we've seen some of those adverse effects. So I think what we're doing today is vitally important. And again, thank you for your input to help us do that, because I think the residents of the island are why we're all here. So
thank you, sir. Ms. Whalen?
I think the passion in the room has been pretty evident today. The fact that what seems logical, something being a single-family unit being seen as something more than that, to me, defies rationality. So I concur with what everybody else said here, is that if we want a residential component to the island and we want to preserve those neighborhoods, we found the hole, we found the problem. I think Missy and the town team have done a good job in explaining that to us in the presentation today, and how to deal with those nonconformities if someone needs to, in the spirit of preserving their residents. If there's a disaster, they can continue, they can rebuild without being at risk. So I have no problem with this, and I think the passion in the room is pretty clear.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I would have little to add, except one of the important things at the last meeting was to make sure we better understood the impact of the Native Islanders community. And I think you've done a good job of explaining that as a de minimis impact, and certainly lots of ways to work through a very small number of properties. I know we were very concerned with that, and I think you've struck the right balance, staff, to answer that question, at least to my satisfaction. Any further discussion? Okay, it's been moved, seconded, and discussed. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman,
No, what did I do?
We're going to public comment.
I'm trying, folks. Okay. Any public comment? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. So if you vote to move this, if you will vote to recommend to move this forward, to make the recommendation to the town council, I was looking at the time chart, actually putting this plan in motion and the LMO changes aren't going to happen for another full year. So what's going to happen between now and the end of 2024? How do we solve for that? So I know that we're here addressing the larger scale problem, but it happens very quickly here. The development happens very quickly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Staff, is there an answer to that in terms of timing?
The summary of setbacks and buffers from single to multi says there's no changes or they're reduced other than water proximity, I believe. Is this accurate, or is there more to this? I'm just confused about this. There's an additional thing I've been looking at. Do we really think that there's no changes to setbacks going from single family to multifamily? Can we count on that? Because I think there may be other documents or attachments that we're not seeing. Is this possible?
Can you help us, staff?
Yeah, she said she'll respond after all the comments are done.
I'm sorry, okay.
I didn't hear that.
What, the point here is everybody gets to make comments, they don't get to ask questions.
Oh, sorry,
They can make
sorry.
they can ask the questions, and then when we're
Okay.
finished, we'll
No,
attempt
no,
to.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
And I guess the other question I might have is, are all these people that will have these new non-conforming structures, have they been notified that their rights are being affected right now? Because this non-conforming thing is kind of harsh. I mean, one statement says, legal nonconformities are allowed to continue in accordance with the regulations of this chapter.
And I won't answer the question given what I just said, but yeah. The legal nonconformity.
Kind of imperious.
Legal nonconformity,
Yes,
to me,
and
means just that.
The most likely thing is a storm, and I don't see, what is it? We're back here to the 50% rule or something. If a big hurricane comes through, it's going to be more than 50%. I guess the exceptions would be family compounds. Apparently, they could rebuild. I don't know. But that's my question is, are we certain as to the setbacks? Because I think there's other attachments. I just don't have them in my packet. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment, please?
Yeah, this is related to that point, which is the setbacks would not change, they say, but if you want to get a variance, you have to go to the BZA, and single family can get a variance of down to 5 feet. But multifamily, now you have 2 units, you're considered multifamily, your variance would only be allowed for 10%. So it's adding, in effect, net 13 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Levon Stevens, for the record, the chairman of the Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force. Congratulations to our new commissioners. And also want to commend the staff for trying to work through some of these definitions and just make sure that it's kind of clear to everyone. But I did want to point out a couple of things about some of the information that I heard earlier. What happened in 2014, in fact, was not something that was supposed to benefit the Native Island community. Our task force was not created until after that. And also, as far as the comments of what people want in their neighborhoods and their residents and all those good things, I think we all want the same thing. It's hard to say no development, but we do want to have smart development. There are also people in our communities that have property that they want to do things with, and they do want to see an increase in density. So we have to navigate that balance and make sure that when we talk about who's representing the community, that we're representing the whole community, and we're certainly hearing from what we've been working on in our task force for the last almost 5 years now. So when we say people are speaking for the island, and whether you've been here 40 years, 50 years, or 60 years, the folks that I talk to have families who've been here for over 150 years. So I just want to make sure that our voices are being heard, our concerns are being met and considered. And I trust the commission and town council and staff to work with us and to make sure that we hear all the voices and from the right representation.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Well said. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make the point that of the Gullah people that we've talked to, and my husband is from a Gullah family, and we have a Gullah neighborhood, the Jonesville neighborhood. We've gone to neighbors one-on-one and talked to a lot of the Gullah neighbors there, and they want what the majority of the island residents want. They don't want overdevelopment.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Steve Robinson, just a concerned citizen. I strongly urge this board, working with the town council, as of like tomorrow, call for a moratorium on all multiple dwelling permits. This is what I think the island wants. We've overdeveloped. All the talk in the world. This lady a couple of minutes ago asked what's going to happen in the next year, because the new LMO was going to take time to get done. So I think it should be a moratorium. Ain't going to hurt us, and you're going to satisfy a lot of islanders, and they see a board and a town council that hears them, and that you're going to have a moratorium on any more multi-dwelling permits for the next, you decide with town council. Next 2 years, next year and a half, with the possible exception of an emergency, like hospitals, something of that nature. And maybe commercial, but as far as addressing the visitors and the short-term rentals and this and that, it's the rapid permitting of letting people do things, with the exception of single dwelling homes. No one's asking you to put a stop on that within reason. But multiple dwelling homes seems to be the biggest problem on this island. And a moratorium is not going to hurt anybody except help this island. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Be assured we'll put that comment forward. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes.
Just that 2 units will require, instead of a driveway now, 2 units would be, you'd have to have access easement, 20-foot plus a 10-foot buffer. So that's a lot different. So you may not be able to get back to the plot behind your house where you want to put an extra home. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments? Okay, since I did that out of order, I think we've got to go back and say, is there a motion as written up there? Who moved it the first time?
No, sir, you have a motion that's been seconded.
I thought that was inappropriate because I didn't have the comments first. So we're good in terms of having the motion on the table, appropriately seconded, fully discussed, including public comment, correct? Okay, thank you. Having said all of that, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks unanimous. Looks unanimous, and again, at least I would like to express the thanks for the staff to listening to as much of this as they could, for the commission to understand as much as this as we can, and to make the word I think was used, balance. And that's a very important word these days on this island, and I think we've done the best we can in this circumstance to move that forward in that way, and we'll keep trying to do that. And I don't know that we'll always get it right, but we'll do our best. So, okay. I have some other business here that is important for us at this point, and I want to ask, what also has happened is Mr. Elbert and the mayor used to be members of this planning commission. They are now not, because they've moved on to bigger and better things, so we had to fill those 2 openings. Today, Mr. Siebold, Bruce Siebold, is absent because he had a long-standing, important surgical procedure to do, so he asked me to fill in for him, which I've been glad to do. But we do have the business then, especially because we now have our new members on board, to use the nominating process to come up with new leadership, being the chairman and the vice chairman. The nominating committee met yesterday, and I'm going to ask Mr. Campbell to make the report of that committee.
Yes, the nominating committee nominated Bruce Seabolt for chairman and Mark Seavoice as vice chair.
Okay. Mark O'Neill.
Oh, Mark O'Neill, sorry.
That's okay.
Mark O'Neill.
Bruce wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the motion. Is there a second, please?
So moved.
Okay, there's a second. Further discussion? Any nominations from the rest of the commission? Okay. Hearing none of either. All in favor of that slate of officers, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. The other thing I would like to report to you on very briefly is that as part of this transition that we've been going through, we've been very careful to try to make sure we understand not only the detail of what was put in front of us, but some of the context which we've heard today, that the commission understands that better. We're considering some rules changes in the future, and so what we want to make sure of is that we have a very good orientation as to how all of this happens, because you've seen it. There's so much going on. And so to that end, we've suggested that there be a workshop or retreat, whatever you prefer to call it, with the new members, the old members, and planning staff to continue to review and orient ourselves on how things are done so that we get it right as often as we can. And that will be coming before us soon to do that kind of a meeting and that kind of a dialogue in an attempt to keep us all on the same page. Are there any questions about that? Okay, are there any staff reports? No staff reports? Okay.
I was just going to mention in my staff report, excuse me, that we are planning on a training opportunity for the whole Planning Commission and especially for the new members. And we're going to cover our plan. We're going to do a broad brush of the LMO as it stands today and go over good governance guides. We'll go over the rules of procedure and operations of a planning commission. And so it will be a broad training. Also, as it relates to the larger LMO amendment project, we intend to, prior to the public hearing that we're going to have on the amendments, we'll have the LMO amendments before the Planning Commission for introduction prior to the hearing. So we're going to program in multiple meetings with the Planning Commission so that you have an opportunity to be introduced to the subject material, and then the public hearing would happen after. So we had a meeting last week to talk about some changes to how we communicate better with the Planning Commission, and those are just some of the outcomes. And we'll talk about some more opportunities for further engagement with the Planning Commission at that training session.
Thank you very much, Missy.
Missy, one question. Will the Planning Commission be doing the Gullah Tour as part of their workshop?
We could try to make that happen.
Okay. I think that's important.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah,
But as part of that, we think we should take a half a...
See the Jonesville area. It has been a lot of interest in the reading I've done. I'd like to see that too.
Okay.
That's doable, right, Missy?
Well, it is. Requires a bus.
Thank you. Any further business to come before the commission today? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.